So we've been looking at large-scale monuments. You just saw the video for Stonehenge, which is an ancient monument. And although that is very, very old, it's thousands of years old, human beings still make this kind of stuff. We still make these large-scale monuments out of very permanent materials, granite and other kinds of stone. We build things to last. As a way of signifying importance. In Stonehenge, we were looking at a ceremonial site, a religious site, a spiritual site. But we make these kinds of permanent structures for all sorts of different purposes. Probably one of the most common purposes is as memorials. Uh, um, a monument that is created to create a memory of a person or an event to remember um, so people can remember that person or event. One of the most famous modern monuments is a monument called the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, built by an artist and architect named Maya Lin. And this is probably one of the most beloved monuments in the United States. It is visited by millions of people every year in Washington, D.C., and there's a traveling version that travels around. And hundreds of thousands of people go to see that every year. But as much loved as this monument is now, there was really quite a bit of controversy when it was first created, for many different reasons. Um, First of all, uh, it's a very strange design in terms of monuments or traditional monuments. When we often think of monuments, we think of large-scale structures like, well, for instance, you can see the Washington Monument in the background. But even more traditionally, we think of things maybe like the Lincoln Memorial. Large structures that are made of a white marble or a very lightly colored granite that are placed up on a hill or a pedestal, some place where people can see the monument from miles around. And as with the Lincoln Memorial and other very traditional kinds of monuments and memorials, you'll often see a sculpture of the person or the people who that monument is made for. But if you look at the Vietnam Memorial, you can see that in many ways it's the opposite of what we consider to be a traditional monument. And it certainly was startling to see when the designs were first submitted in the early 1980s. It is very stripped down, it is very minimal. There are no images of soldiers whatsoever. There are no images of soldiers whatsoever. Um, there are only names, over 50,000 names of the men and women who gave their lives in the Vietnam War. Also, where most monuments are placed high, it is low. It is buried in the ground, so there are no images. It is placed low, and where most monuments are brightly colored, it is black. So the question, and I want you to think about this, the question is why? Why would Maya Lan create a monument that is in many ways the opposite of all other monuments? Think about the Vietnam War and ask yourself, was this a war that was strongly supported across the United States? And of course, the answer is no. It was a war that deeply divided our country and caused deep political and cultural rifts in our society. And in some ways, we're still dealing with those rifts, guys. So Maya Lan had a hard sort of puzzle when it comes to designing this monument. She had to make a monument that honored the service and the sacrifice of these men and women who were willing to give their lives, but at the same time, um, she had to sort of step around the issue that the Vietnam War was a war that many people did not support. So, how do you do that? How do you honor a sacrifice, which everybody would agree is a noble thing, for a purpose that a lot of people disagreed with? Well, Maya Lin, first of all, chooses not to mention anything that directly references the Vietnam War. So she takes away all images. There are no pictures of soldiers. There are no references directly to the Vietnam era. Certainly, nothing political. None of the arguments of why we were in or white people want us to get out of the war are present here. But instead, all we get are names, because that's what she wants to focus on. She wants to focus on these men and women who gave their lives to their country. And in many ways, this wall is meant to serve as a, a tomb, or as a giant gravestone. So the color black is related to funerals, and so we get this very, very somber kind of appearance. Also, the wall is literally buried in the ground, much like you would bury a body. But there is a sort of slight reference here to the way that the wall divided our country. The wall cuts into a hillside. If you're standing above the wall, you can't even see the monument. But notice it forms this sort of massive wedge that divides the hill, in many ways the same way the Vietnam War divided our country. But what she's trying to do here, though, also is more than just honor the soldiers. She's trying to tell us something. She's trying to um, give us a reason for their sacrifice. So when you go to the Vietnam Memorial and you stand in front of this polished black granite, you'll see something more than simply the names. What you see is your face. Now, why do you think that is? Why would she basically make a large mirror that we look into? And when we look in that mirror, you see, well, these names reflected over your face. What do you think? Yeah, because it's what she's trying to do is show us that we are the reason for that sacrifice. When we look in this mirrored surface, we see ourselves. We are the reason these men and women gave their lives. And so she's sort of saying that this is beyond any kind of political struggle. This is beyond political opinion. This is about respecting those who are willing to die for the greater good. And that's what this monument is actually about. But that is not the only thing that made the Vietnam War Memorial controversial. Maya Lin was a very controversial choice. First of all, she was very, very young. She was only 21 years old. She was still a student when she got the commission. And once Congress decided that they were going to build this wall, thousands and thousands, over 14,000 architects and architectural firms submitted their designs. And out of all those people, Maya Lin, this undergraduate, um, beat out all these, some very, very famous and respected architects. Now, I don't know about you, but I feel a little bad about what I accomplished when I was 21 years old, because I certainly wasn't building, the Vietnam, wall. I built a wall of beer cans in my dorm room once, but that's a whole other story. Um, so there was controversy about her age. Um, there's also a very famous story that one of her professors in college also submitted designs, and Maya Lin won over her professor. And to make it even, I think, funnier, and is that Maya Lin actually got a B in the class where she submitted this design. Uh, Boy, how's that for a professor revenge story? But also another major source of controversy was Maya Lin's ethnicity. Maya Lin is an American. She was born in Ohio, but her parents are both Chinese immigrants. And because of China's involvement with the Vietnam War, there was some resentment and some um, anti-Chinese sentiment thrown her way by some people who believe that somebody of Chinese heritage should not be making this monument. And so these things sort of added up. And eventually Maya Lin had to go in front of Congress, sort of justify her design, even though after it was already chosen. But there was a compromise that had to be made. Um, a more traditional monument was placed next to the Vietnam Wall. It includes images of Vietnam soldiers, it includes images of them wearing Vietnam era uniforms and carrying Vietnam era weapons. And while it's still somber and it's not placed high on a pedestal, it is much more traditional in terms that it is figurative. It is pictures of people. Um, but of course, very few people even know this monument is there unless you actually go to the wall. It is the untraditional, sort of minimal um, wall that has gained the notoriety. But these kinds of large scale places, these places made with permanent materials, um, for whatever purpose, we still create them and we still flock to them in much the same way that the ancients flocked to Stonehenge. Um, Today we have people who want to honor our soldiers going to Washington, D.C., and to the wall that Maya Lin created.